Firstly, I would like to say that I will be presenting this article with both direct quotation from the reference and as well as using my own words to elaborate the points. The article is entitled The Impact of Electronic Media Violence, Scientific Theory and Research, written by Rawal Huseman. In the 21st century, the development of the media has had a huge impact on our lives. With technology and media such as radio, television, movies, videos, video games, cell phones, and computer networks, they have assumed central roles in the lives amongst the youth and adolescents. The media has had profound influences on the youth and adolescents' beliefs and values. Unfortunately, a particular element in the media has had detrimental effects on the youth and adolescents, that being media violence. This raises concern on the issue. The recent use of text messaging, email, and chat rooms by youth have opened up new venues for social interaction in which aggression can occur and youth can be victimized. The development of the media doesn't pose a threat psychologically, but rather introduces a new problem, the difficulty of controlling the exposure of media. Thus, this brings the point to the aim of the article. The aim of the article is self-explanatory. The aim is to understand the topic of media violence and how it affects violent behavior. The paper also aims to help the youth understand the negative effects of the media violence and help them try to avoid it. It also hopes to control the exposure of media violence to the extent in which we're capable of. Media violence is defined as visual portrayals, as acts of physical aggression by one human or human-like character against one another. Aggressive behavior refers to an act that is intended to injure or irritate another person. Aggression can be physical or non-physical, and it includes many kinds of behavior that do not seem to fit the commonly understood meaning of violence. For instance, if you insult a friend with the intention of hurting the person. But the form of aggression that is of major concern is physical aggression, where the behavior can range from pushing and shoving to more serious acts such as assaults and homicide. The term violent behavior is used to describe this form of physical aggression. Media violence can result in two types of effects, one being the short-term and the other being the long-term. Short-term effects can be explained by three theoretical concepts: priming, arousal, and mimicry. Priming can be seen as a process of activating the brain's neural network. For instance, if you see a gun which represents an external stimuli, it will excite another brain node representing cognition or emotion, in this case behavior of aggression. So by seeing acts of violence, it primes aggressive concepts which makes aggression more likely. Arousal can be seen as excitement. A stimulate arouses an emotion, so a stimulus being media violence could arouse an emotion of anger. Mimicry can be viewed as a special case because it also relates to the long-term observational learning. It is basically monkey see, monkey do. Just like how a baby monkey tends to imitate certain behaviors, children observe violent behavior are prone to mimic it. In long-term observational learning, when we are growing up, we encode in our memory social scripts that guide behavior through observation of our family, peers, community, and the mass media. The thing is, we continue these behaviors long after we observe them. Desensitization is defined as constant exposure to media violence, which gets the child accustomed to it and therefore rids the child of any negative effect. For instance, a child might be scared of media violence in the beginning, but constant exposure to it will get the child used to the idea and therefore not see it as something bad. Given this theoretical background, we move on to empirical studies. Meta-analyses provided the best overall estimates of the effects of media violence. Two meta-analyses that were very prominent in this paper was Pack and Comstock and Anderson and Bushman. Pack and Comstock examined effect sizes from 217 studies published from 1957 to 1990. Anderson and Bushman studies the effects of violent video games. For experiments, one of the experiments showed that children who viewed violent films or clips displayed more aggressive behavior compared to those who were not exposed to violent films or clips. The disadvantage with cross-sectional and longitudinal studies is that it does not test causation compared to experiment, but The advantage of it is it provides strong evidence that the causal processes demonstrated in experiments generalize to violence observed in the real world. The findings of the paper show that randomized experiments demonstrate that exposure to media violence resulted in aggressive behavior in the short term. The most probable cause for this could be priming. Longitudinal field studies also showed that exposure to violent games resulted in the increased likelihood of aggressive behavior in children in the long term. These long-term effects is due to powerful observational learning and desensitization processes that occur involuntarily in a human child. From whatever that we have discussed, evidence and facts clearly show that media violence increases the risk significantly that the viewer or game player will behave more violently both in the short and long run. This is the general conclusion of this article. Adults and children behave aggressively in the short run, and children behave aggressively in the long run. It is relevant to my chosen topic because this article seeks to understand the idea of the topic and shows clear evidence that support the conclusion mentioned earlier.